All right, so I did a round of welcomes. Welcome again, and welcome Mayor Wu. Welcome John Tobin of Northeastern. Welcome everyone to the 48th Gardeners Gathering. And without further ado, I want to introduce the President and CEO of the Trustees, Katie Theoharides.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. We are thrilled to be with you today as we kick off this spring season in Boston with the Gardeners Gathering, and it really is spring outside, which is fantastic. A big thank you to Northeastern University for hosting us once again this year. This special event is in its 48th year and is such a bright sign of community hope and strength and the promise of spring. So as we gather today to prepare for a beautiful and bountiful growing season, we also are here to honor an absolute community legend in the late Mel King. It was Mel King who, as state rep 50 years ago, introduced the Massachusetts Gardening and Farming Act, which led to the development of community gardens throughout the city and throughout the Commonwealth, turning vacant lots into cherished community gems. Mel's advocacy and legislative leadership and connection to the community paved, or should I say planted the way, for decades in which partnership between the community gardens and the mayor's office has thrived. Since its inception, the Gardeners Gathering has been a space where the mayor's office and gardening community can come together to plan, dream, and advocate for continued growth of urban gardening. And we're thrilled to have Mayor Wu with us today to continue that long tradition. Thank you, Mayor. At the Trustees, we're proud to steward 56 community gardens and 15 acres of productive green space in Boston that came to us in 2014 when we merged with the Boston Natural Areas Network. The gardens are so much more than just a place to grow food. In the 1970s, these places transformed vacant lots, with neighbors coming together to beautify an empty patch of land and put faith in the future harvest. We know that community gardens help provide access to the outdoors, increase food security, connect neighbors, provide climate resiliency, increase shade, and decrease heat. They host pollinators and other important wildlife in the city space, including wild turkeys, which many of you have seen in these gardens. But I think most importantly, they are places of inclusion where neighbors come together to share seeds and stories, share food, meet up and work the land, and create a welcoming space for anyone who wants to turn a spade full of dirt and share the experience. At the Trustees, these are one of our most popular places, and we plan to increase this space by 20% in the next 5 years. So we have big goals. Please enjoy the day, attend the workshops. I'm really looking forward to the next panel. And I wanted to say a special thanks to Northeastern, who is hosting us today and has been our partner in this effort, and to turn things over to John Tobin, the Northeastern Vice President of City and Community Engagement. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to Northeastern. Give yourselves a big round of applause for coming out. Let's hear it. It is great to have you all here once again here at our university here in the heart of the city, and to see the reflection of the city in this room, in this small room, a reflection, a microcosm of the city of Boston is really outstanding. And I do want to say a word and welcome the King family here. As a student of politics, growing up in Mattapan and then moving to West Roxbury and just following politics like it was a sport in the city, I'll never forget the contributions, the legacy, and the impact that Mel King had on the city, not just as a community advocate, but as a state representative. And even though he lost for mayor in 1983, the resounding impact that had on this city for many, many years. I'll never forget the Boston Herald. It was such a shock that he made it into the final. And I remember the headline in the Boston Herald was "King's in like Flynn," and that was the headline. And so his legacy obviously endured long after politics, and the opportunities just to come along. I remember I finished the Boston Marathon 7 or 8 years ago. I think it was at night. I don't. So and I was struggling up the street, and I was with my wife and my two boys who were helping me actually back into the car, and there was Mel King walking down the street, just walking down the street, and the opportunity to introduce my boys to this living legend was extraordinary and such a treat to be part of this great city. I also want to say that I think of when I come to this, I haven't been here in a couple of years, and I know there was a couple of years of you know what that we didn't have this, and when I come to this gathering, I think about my dad. My dad passed away in 2016, and he was a construction worker, a laborer, retired early. We had a tragedy in our life, and he found his solace in his garden. And let me just say, my father was probably not known as the most progressive person I ever knew growing up. But that garden and his gardening and the people that he interacted with, who also had gardens in the neighborhood, led to many, many conversations with people who didn't look like him, who didn't talk like him, who weren't where he was from. And that made my father softer and gentler and more understanding and compassionate towards people that I had never seen before. And he grew that garden with such love, and he loved to grow tomatoes and cucumbers and lettuce and provide for us and put it on our table. And that was the way he gave back to his family. But it also got him to, thinking a lot about that garden and how things grow. And I think about the mayor in this way. When you think about it, as the mayor of Boston, you're really a gardener, because you're continuing to make the city grow in so many ways, and you grow different plants that don't look like each other, that aren't like each other, but they have to coexist next to each other. You've got to weed out the people who don't want to move forward and keep moving forward. So the mayor is really a gardener, and I will say this, with all the talented people here who garden all over the city, farmers and agriculture and gardens, and my dad, like I said, was outstanding. I inherited none of that. In fact, my last gardening attempt was in a Christmas grab here at Northeastern. I won a Willie Nelson chia pet, and Willie has now joined the recycling bin of the city of Boston. So that was ill-fated, but I want to thank you all for your contributions to our city and providing these gardens of hope and of comfort and of solace for so many people in the city of Boston. Your unselfish acts in providing these places are really extraordinary. So it's a great day to recognize you all, to thank you all. And it's now my pleasure to bring up someone who's probably getting sick of me, because I've introduced her about 5 times in the past week at different events. So I promise I'll go away now, Mayor. But as I said yesterday, this is a person who really looks at the city through the lens of young people. We haven't had a mayor in 50 years who's had young kids, and how you look at through that lens, and it gives a different perspective to the city. And as we get older and we think, well, the next generation, the world ends with us, but no, it really doesn't. The future is very, very bright in this city, and it's really because of the leadership of the mayor and her extraordinary team and continuing to move this city forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big, warm Northeastern Gardeners Gathering welcome to the mayor of the city of Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu.
Everyone. Thank you so much, John, for all that you do and for hosting us once again. The reason we've seen each other so often is because you're so involved in so many different community events and important causes. Although I have to say, I'm going to need to learn more about weeding from this group. I never thought of it that way before. Most of the times that John has introduced me has been at one of the many St. Patrick's Day roasts that we have this time of year. And so it's in some ways a little bit fitting that we get to celebrate green in multiple ways throughout the month of March. But in that spirit, I figured I would start as I'm trying to practice my funny muscle before tomorrow as one last ditch effort. Okay. Why can't you get angry with a yam? You know this one, all right, right? Because they're such sweet potatoes. Okay. In honor of, okay, in honor of John's father, why did the tomato blush? Because she saw the salad dressing. Okay, and this one's like an MBTA crossover here. Why do fungi have to pay double bus fares? Because they take up 2 mushroom. Okay. All right. I'm gonna bomb tomorrow. It's not I want to thank Katie and the trustees and everyone here for making sure we have the infrastructure and the growth itself, the blossoming of our gardening community. To my colleagues at the city level who make that possible and who are reimagining how city government can participate in that. I'm so grateful and indebted to you. And you know, I will start a little bit with what Katie was talking about earlier of to see these images and to think about the legacy and the history that we have been gifted because of the actions of those who have come before us and tended those gardens, and especially of the amazing Honorable Mel King. We're so thankful to continue living under his light and under the shade that he planted. 50 years since the Massachusetts Gardening and Farm Act. And that those words on a page came from the real life conversations and the people that Representative King knew and loved. It also came from that spirit that we all have an obligation to ensure we're making good, not just for this generation, but for those to come. Protecting people's rights to use vacant public land for farming and gardening led to the city starting the Revival Program in 1975 and paved the way for the spaces that now we can't even imagine not being there. But it was very close, depending on one conversation here and there, one bit of legislation, one vote, and a coalition coming together that Mel King built. So I want to thank Ms. Joyce and the entire family, Pamela and Nancy and everyone for continuing to help us see the fruits of his labor and for your sacrifices as he planted so many seeds in his life that continue to blossom. Mel was a garden in which everything grew, a poet who brought that sentiment to seeing the world and sharing it, and a gardener in growing together all of the different seedlings of affordable housing, of racial justice, education, public land access, digital literacy. He cared about anything and everything that would make life better for people. And as long as it met that criteria, he was going to help make it grow. I am so grateful that even in the time that I had as an early city councilor, and someone who lived nearby for a little bit when I could still barely afford to be in the South End, that was a long while ago, that Mel was so kind and so willing to mentor another young person, even as he had retired, even as he was busy now with the second and third and fourth and fifth phase of his public service. So much of the work that I'm still trying to move forward and that our administration is still moving forward today really is from the seeds that he planted. We just had our hearing on the proposed ordinance to establish a city planning department for the very first time, change and in some ways take back the structure of the BRA and the BPDA to put power in the hands of people with accountability. And I think of him and his generosity as I was first doing that research and coming over to the house and getting his advice on how to frame it and how to do it. And he read through all of the report and then told me, that all looks good, but how are you going to make it happen? Right? It was all about how to take the idea, the words, but then actually make it grow in the ground, on the ground in the community. And so I'm really grateful that we get now to see so much of the tender loving care that he watered into so many of us coming to fruition as well. We try to carry that on in multiple ways in city government. Our Grow Boston initiative carries on today with respect to community gardens, and under the leadership of Shawnee Fletcher, in just the last year alone, The city has invested nearly $400,000 in capacity building and innovative food production for urban gardening and farming organizations. We've built 13 new gardens at schools and senior centers, invested in garden supplies for 24 community gardens and 44 urban agriculture outreach events, and invested another $100,000 in gardens at Boston Housing Authority housing sites across the city, again, to make the connection that we need to work on it all at the same time. By June, this team will have built 300 raised beds for residents and have 500 more planned for the next few years. We have 10 community gardens, food forests, or urban farms currently in the pipeline to be created on city land through our grassroots program. And next month, we'll release our Boston Urban Agriculture Strategy Report, the culmination of a year-long community engagement process that will inform future programming and investments, including in gardening expansion and education. Thank you so much to the team and for everyone who has worked with them on this. In addition to Shawnee and Chief Sheila Dillon, I want to recognize and thank other members of the Grow Boston Advisory Board, who I believe are here. Of course, Vidya from the Trustees, Miss Vivian Morris from the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, Danielle from the Food Project, Apollo from the Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation, Elnora from the Nightingale Community Garden, Pete from Recover Green Roofs, and Barbara from the Urban Farming Institute. Exciting news on that front as well. We are so blessed to have such an incredible group of leaders advancing this work across the city. I also want to shout out and acknowledge our Office of Food Justice Director, Eliza Wasserman, who's also with us today. I walked in with her, but I don't know where Lisa. Okay, so we're here. Her team is leading the way to ensure that as we grow and green our city, we're also making the connection to effectively and sustainably support community health with the nourishment for individuals and families who need it most. And we're so grateful to have the Trustees partnership in doing all of this and making sure that all of these ventures move forward equitably with a greener, healthier, and more beautiful future for all of us. Thank you so much. Happy spring and congratulations to all this year's awardees.
So without further ado, we're going to announce our 3 garden awards for the year. So I'm gonna do description, but I can also. So you want to actually do? Maybe we can do like a little drum roll.
Okay, this one's.
So for Rookie Garden of the Year, drum roll.
Upham's Food Forest.
Yay! Where are members of Upham's Food Forest? So in 2016, and an empty 8,000 square foot lot sat, 8,000 square foot lot sat unused on Everett Ave in Dorchester. The neighbors of Upham's Corner and the members of the Jones Hill Neighborhood Association worked consistently for over 4 years to acquire the land for public use. In partnership with the Boston Food Forest Coalition, they converted the lot into an edible public park. Construction began in spring of 2021 and was completed in October 2021. Today, this food forest is a vibrant, beautiful garden for neighbors to connect with each other and the earth in a neighborhood that previously lacked open space. Upham's Food Forest it is one of 10 and counting food forests in Boston, which form a network of climate resilient spaces in our city. Thank you for all of your work for Upham's Food Forest. I can't wait to come visit more this year.
I just wanted to quickly say that it's actually 7 years since this started, and we're getting a Rookie of the Year award, which is really well, I have a point there though, because this is a dog's story, but dog's life, right? But I think it really speaks to what people have been talking about with Mel King's work here, which is that we're patient and impatient, and we should be both patient in knowing that we can get there, and but knowing we have to work for a long time, so we have to be impatient as much as we are patient.
All right. So next up is our Hall of Fame garden for the year. Drum roll.
The Lennox Kendall Community Garden.
So the Lennox Kendall Garden is blessed with large plots and deep soil and full sunshine. The garden was developed with the help of the Boston Urban Gardeners and the Community Development Block Grant. The garden's first coordinator was a remarkable woman who resided in the apartment building on Kendall Street, from which she could watch over the entire space. She paid for and planted most of the shrubs and perennials in our present borders. Today, mothers can often be heard explaining to their children which plant produces which vegetable as they walk by. At Lennox Kendall, at least 4 languages can be heard. This diversity brings a diversity of vegetables and methods to growing them. It fosters curiosity amongst plot owners and passerby about vegetables of different cultures. And as it does, it also fosters one of the primary purposes of a community garden, which is to bring about new understandings and acquaintances by bringing together people who otherwise might not know each other. Thank you for that beautiful description, Eric.
I'm not a coordinator, but I'm very proud happy to accept this on behalf of 2 past coordinators, Sonny Taylor and the remarkable Emma White, who probably most of you don't know, who was blind and came to our garden on the ride for the last 2 years of her life and took care of the garden. A very remarkable example of how ordinary people can sometimes do very remarkable things. Thank you.
All right, and the last award is unusual, but it's our Hall of Fame gardener. And do you want to just say?
The Honorable Mel King.
So
It's actually Melvin's.
yes. Oh, Joy's here. I just want to say one thing. Typically during the gardeners gathering, we select a local gardener for the most valuable gardener. This year, we felt it fitting to honor Mel King once again for his commitment to social justice and countless contributions to the community garden movement. So,
No, I just wanted to say this is, well, Melvin was in the State House. This was his favorite by far activity that he did in any of the work that he did in the 10 years he was in the legislature. So I had to come today because it meant this organization and all the years that have gone by and what people have done. He was very, very proud and very, very glad to be a part of it and how people responded and all of that. It was a special place and a special event, a special program for Melvin King. And I thank you for that.
thank you, Mayor Wu, for announcing the awards, and thank you for being here. And I just want to say, John, thank you so much. That was a great speech, and we're so grateful to Northeastern. I really can't reiterate enough that you make this event possible, and their generosity with the space is just is so instrumental to Gardeners Gathering. So just, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Rue. Thank you, John Tobin. Thank you, Katie. Thank you for being here. I think it's time for our panel. And so can our panelists start getting ready at the table? So many of our urban gardeners in Boston are still tended to by their founders and by instrumental activists who have helped the spaces thrive. Today, we are so excited to host a panel of 5 garden leaders who have a long and deep history of food justice and work in the city of Boston. So a round of applause for our 5 garden panelists and our facilitator today. Give them a minute to set up. Connie, are you gonna be here? And Julie. Yeah. A little tight. Honestly, Shani, I wonder if oh no, Julie, you're one more over. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was sort of thinking about it before. Oh, yeah, don't back up too much. No. Okay. Do you want this, Lolita? Okay. All right, I'm going to give some really brief introductions, but you can read everyone's bio in the program. Just to reiterate, the program is online. There's a couple of paper copies you can flip through on the table outside in the exhibitors hall. And if you want to find the online program, it's bit.ly/GG program 2024. So we have going from right to left facing them. We have our facilitator, Shawnee Fletcher, who, director of Grow Boston and longtime Boston grower and community advocate. So welcome, Shawnee. Maybe we'll save applause for at the end. So then we have Julie Stone, founding member of Boston Urban Gardens, photographer and community organizer. We have Lolita Parker Jr., co-caretaker at Bessie Barnes and United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury Community Gardens, oral historian, photographer, and green space advocate. We have Elnora Thompson, volunteer coordinator at Nightingale Community Garden and longtime community educator. We have Sarah Hutt, volunteer coordinator at Berkeley Community Garden and community arts advocate. And last but not least, we have Vivian Morris, volunteer coordinator at Kennedy Community Garden, chairperson at Edgewood Neighborhood Association, and founder and chairperson of Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. Welcome, everyone.
On? Oh, it is on. Okay. I was looking for a light. There was no light. Thank you, everyone. And thank you all to the panelists. I just wanted to say briefly that I'm so happy to be here. This community has meant so much to me for the over 20 years. I can't actually remember which garden I first started gardening in. But Nightingale was one of my earliest. So I've known Elnora in that capacity for a long time. And I'm just so thrilled to have this incredible panel of women and to be able to have them share Boston's rich community gardening history with all of us. And also so happy to have the King family here and to be celebrating Mel King and the Farm and Garden Act that he sponsored. It's really something to think about that this all, so much of this kicked off about 50 years ago, and we get to still be here growing. And I was also saying earlier to Sheila that we're seeing some of these pictures, it's really hard to imagine, like the spaces that I take for granted are spaces that, we did not have more, over 50 years ago. So it's really lovely to see those pictures, and we'll get started. So we're gonna start by having each panelist tell us, and we've sat folks in a roughly chronological order. So we're gonna start with Julie in terms of their relationship to community gardening and the start of many of the gardens of Boston. So please tell us, what are your memories, starting with Julie again, or knowledge of the garden or gardens that you have been involved with? Works.
Hello, it is. First, I want to say that I am so moved by seeing all of us together. I mean, I was a part of Boston Urban Gardeners very early on, a small nonprofit. And the first gardeners gathering really was very purposeful and strategic. We called together a number of the gardeners all over the city and met at the Piedmonte room on the 5th floor at City Hall with a potluck and some seeds to give away. And we sat there because we really wanted the mayor and the city councilors to know that we were serious about this movement, about the land and about the resources that we needed in order to grow food. It was really coming off of a time of a lot of turmoil, as you all know. I won't reiterate, but busing, Vietnam War, all of this was still fomenting. And people were getting together in gardens that, as people have noted, that would never have met each other any other way. In fact, the first garden that I ever went to and how I began to get involved was in the South End, way before we had a land trust, way before it was really part of the urban ecosystem of these gardens that look like they're permanent, because they are. These were not permanent. They were rubble and string and hope and knowledge and love. And that continues. And I think that Mel's legacy really is what were the roots of a lot of that hope, that perseverance, and I'm okay. Okay. And really that belief and heart. Now, the first gardens that I was involved in were sort of serendipity. It was the Herder Community Garden. There was a photo there with a windmill. And the first community, it wasn't a gathering. It was like a kind of a meeting where it was to really teach people more about gardening, because they had a lot of alternative energy. And to give you some idea, we had solar panels on the building, the windmill to get water. And the person that found the water, this is actually kind of funny, was Greg Watson, who became the Commissioner of Food and Agriculture for the state. And at that time, we were all sort of like, I don't know what you'd call us, because I was never really a hippie. I was more of a beatnik. So Greg went around with a divining rod and found the water. Needless to say, the garden, which is still there, and I'm a member of the garden, was right next to the Charles River. But be that as it may, to note about that garden, we actually almost lost that garden 2 years ago. It was a huge fight, and we really had to gather all kinds of people, city councilors from all over. It's in Alston, and the DCR in a new master plan felt it should be a lawn instead of a garden. And we persevered, and we will be there, but we don't own the land. Am I getting close?
Yes.
I
was going to say
okay.
thank you.
I will continue about the second garden that I worked at for 10 years later on, the Berkeley Street Garden, of which many of those pictures, and without the city help, 4 grassroots grants, 2 small grants from the Boston Foundation, and many, many volunteers. And I just want to honor and reiterate that we're all volunteers, that nobody here in terms of garden coordination and all of that is paid. It's kind of miraculous in this day and age. And the last thing I want to say in Mel's honor is that we always involved youth. We always involved young people, and that's part of his legacy. Sorry.
Thank you. Lolita.
So I'm glad to be back here at Northeastern. I came here 30 years ago from Los Angeles, and the first job I ever had was researching this, how the neighborhood known as Lower Roxbury came to look like it did. And so the first thing I met a man, and his name was Vinnie Haynes. I had to bring Vinnie out today. Cameron Vincent Haynes, he was the president of the Lower Roxbury Community Corporation, which later became the Madison Park Development Corporation for 25 years. And when I met him, he used to take me riding around the neighborhood in his car, pointing out things that weren't there. So, which I now know where they are. I wanted to say that when I first I'm a researcher, and I was researching something else at the State House and ran across this bill, the 1974 Garden Farming Act. And I want to name names. People say, why do you got to name all those names? Because they're not only was Royal, excuse me for blocking you, not only was Mel involved, but Royal Bowling, Bill Owens, James Siegel, and Barney Frank, Dolores Bunty. She's not on this one, and many others were involved in this. And then I came, backwards, and I talked to Mel, and he said that there had been a woman in the community, a Latina woman, who was planting things up and down Columbus Ave or wherever she was planting, got some pushback from some people. And then he met with some of the constituents, and they said they wanted to have some land to grow. And so that was one of his platforms for his running. And this was one of the first acts I think it was, I know it was in 1974. I'm still trying to find out the month. And what I wanted to say is that excited me so much. That's when I started talking to Vidya. And I want to give a chance to have this man right here. He's 86 years old. Please stand up, Eustacio. He 86 years old. United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury Community Garden. Let the people see your faces, Eustacio. And he's my inspiration because he's teaching myself and the other co-caretakers, my son, London Parker McWhorter, and others, what it means to be in the garden. He's the first one out every spring. And to show you how things work on the way here, Eustacio, I don't speak Spanish. We've always had a language barrier. But on the way walking here today, a new neighbor that I just met at Northeastern 2 days ago is here doing interpretation, so he could be here. So I wanted to let you know in closing that both of these, I would like everyone here. Thank you, Eustacio. Because we have many gardeners over 80, and I want everyone, if you're so inclined, to sign one of these 2 pages. I'm going to turn them into Northeastern's archives to say this was important 50 years ago, and it's important now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Elnora, the beginnings of Nightingale.
Oh, yeah. My name is Elnora Thompson, and I started at Nightingale over 40 years ago, and there was only 8 people in the garden at the time. And I was the only female. And I was the only person that spoke English. So what I did was I went around the neighborhood and begged people to come in and get a garden. We ended up with 40 people. And we had 40 people up until 15 years ago when we renovated. And now we got over 100 people in Nightingale. And as a coordinator, you need a lot of help. So this wonderful man named Bob, and Mike helps out, Bob does our internet stuff for us. And I'm just a loudmouth that go around the garden yelling at people. making sure we pick up all the trash and calling up Jordan, yelling at him. But I love this garden and I'm always hanging over the fence talking to somebody. I don't know how these people get my telephone number, but they're calling me in the middle of the night. Everybody wants a garden in Dorchester and Nightingale, and we just don't have enough space to accommodate everybody. And I also do community work in my neighborhood. And we just found out last night, there is a nice garden spot on Torrey Street we are going to be able to use. We got through the city. So that would give some people in my neighborhood a chance to garden, more people. And we have children out there in the garden. I love doing work with the children because they're a whole lot better than dealing with grown-ups. I just love kids, you know, and of course we got a lot of turkeys. We got a lot of rabbits. And, you know, we got a little bit of everything in Nightingale, you know. We got a nice orchard, and I am attempting to do a food forest in an empty space we have along the back. So if anybody want to come and visit, please come and visit Nightingale in the summertime. And we have people of every language out there. And we grow something called callaloo. It is the natural spinach of Nightingale. So if you want to come down in the summer, come down and try callaloo. And we are going to be putting in some new garden beds, and they are going to be galvanized steel. And these are all the handicap garden beds. And we do summer camp there for children. I work with the Epiphany School, and whatever school, the home school is coming back this summer. They called me a couple of days ago. They're coming back this summer with the children. And I wanted to say, I lost 3 gardeners in the last 2 years. Actually 4 gardeners in the last 2 years. And I wanted to honor them. Rocky, Mr. James, Mr. Maxwell. Yeah, and the last one is Steve Callender. And Steve was the guy who planted all of those lovely plants across the front of the garden, and we're surely gonna miss him.
Thank you so much, Elnora. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Hutt. I live in the South End and I'm part of the Berkeley Community Garden. I discovered the garden in the 90s, but I had been working on finding housing for artists so we could live and work in the same space. And we were looking at those warehouses in the South End along Harrison Avenue and Washington Street. And that's where I met Mr. King, because he was very encouraging and talking about what we had to do to be able to live and work in the same spot. And he also pointed out that there was a lot of open space in the South End and that we could garden. And so that's how I came upon Berkeley. It's been a real experience. That was in the 90s that I had my first garden. It was at that point, it had been with the Trust for People. They were revamping the garden, putting in with the BRA's guidance. We had to make it accessible to the public. And so we got irrigation, we got a main path, and there was a lot of turmoil. There's some of the pictures that are back here at Berkeley when everything got dug up, and the ground where the gardens are used to be all brownstones. So as you dig up, you would find silverware and cups and medicine bottles and the occasional pet parakeet that had been buried in the backyard. But it was always, people were always really baffled at the things that they were finding in the garden, but they just, demolished the buildings in the 70s and covered them over with a little dirt, and we ended up being on top of it. Berkeley is 60% Asian, and so from the start, it's always been an issue of translation and staying on top of that. The other thing is, when I started, a lot of the older gardeners were starting to time out and either pass on or move in with their kids or something. They were leaving. And so it became really apparent how important it was to pass on information. And so we've always tried to work with the young people and bring in young people into the garden. We have a lottery every year for new members, so we don't keep a list, waiting list. We find that this is a way to sort of bring in new people. That, you know, the idea that there's a waiting list and you could be on it for 5 or 6 years doesn't really keep people interested. And you know, we usually have about a small portion of gardens that turn over every year, but there's always new people.
Thank you, Sarah.
Done?
Vivian.
So thank you for this opportunity to just be here among you all, and especially I would say the King family. But I wanted to share connections to a couple of gardens that are in my neighborhood. I live Mattapan, sort of on the Mattapan Hyde Park line, and with support from another organization that I'm part of, Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition. We've been very active in that community this is our 18th year. The city of Boston, through then Ms. Shani over there, reached out to us now is a little over 10 years ago to see if MFFC was interested in reaching out to community members to see if they'd be interested in using a city plot for a community garden. We reached out to the neighbors. They said they were really happy to have a community garden because it would be an opportunity to bring them together in a really positive way, especially in a community that had had a recent tragedy. And that was the beginning of the Wilson Street Community Garden, which is about to have its 10th anniversary. Yay. Trustees or DNAN who agreed to help once the community decided that it was a community garden, that they would help to create that. And it's been a really important changing space in that community for so many years. But even before that, there was the Kennedy Community Garden, which is along the Neponset River, and it's on state land. But the community, when the Department of Conservation and Recreation said that that land would be available, the community said we wanted a community garden there as a way to give the community its own roots in that community. We weren't sure where that land was going to go, what the state was going to do with it. And we wanted to have a base in it also so that we could advocate for the state to actually invest more in the community, because we had a community playground next to it that was not being well maintained. Okay. And here we are. That's probably 25 years ago with the Kennedy Community Garden. And we put within that a children's garden space because we wanted children in the community to be able to have access to that healthy food, to know what growing's like, and to learn about it. And then the teens from the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition help play the role of managing that children's garden plot. And I'll just very quickly mention the Edgewater Food Forest. Again, I want to give a shout out to so many people, including the city of Boston, for making that land available to Boston Food Forest Coalition, to working with the neighborhood association. Once we decided we wanted a space where that healthy food is absolutely available to everyone who enters, to take the pears, to take the blueberries, to take the grapes, to take the cherries, whatever is growing, and it brings us all together. And so I want to thank everybody for that. But with that, I'll close out.
Thank you, Vivian. So we are a little tight on time. So I'm just going to ask, and we're still going to do our 2 other questions, but if you could talk each of you for about a minute or so about ways that Mel King has directly influenced your garden or your work. Starting with Julie.
Yeah, Mel had a tremendous influence on all the work that we did, either the Land Trust or Boston Urban Gardeners and individual gardens. Originally, I think you all saw that slide that says the I-95 slide. That is the Southwest Corridor Parkland. And without Mel's advocacy, that would never be a linear park with transit system and community gardens built in. Yeah. The other thing that he really began, and which was a huge issue and how many of us got involved directly, was the whole issue of lead and toxic heavy metals in soil. And because of his initiative with the National Guard, we at Bug were able to get through Senator Kerry's office at the time, 6 weeks with the U.S. Army and 4 years with the National Guard delivering soil. We set up 2 places for clean soil where we got it from Worcester, where the state medical facility was being rebuilt and it was agricultural soil, and we brought it in. And then over the many years, we had 2 sites, one in Mattapan, actually Hyde Park, and one at Franklin Park. And from there, we brought in soil directly to the gardens that we tested. And I spent an entire summer testing to see which were the high lead. And we put in at least a foot of soil on top of those gardens that were high lead, that had, buildings put on. It was the very beginning of knowing that soil lead was an issue. That had a huge influence to use the U.S. Army. And the gardeners spread it all. I mean, we did all the work.
Incredible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Nataka Creighton and Bobby Walker, founders of the Urban Food Forest, wrong acronym. United Farming Institute, UFI, brought me into Urban Farming Institute. Okay, I apologize. Thank you for the help. And whenever they would do events, Mel would come. And when I look on when my son, London, blew this up, one of the things that I saw on here, it says in section G, line 6G, it says, priority and allotment of vacant land shall be given to elderly, low income, and youth respectively. So right from the day one, this was the mission. And it is what I learned from Bobby and Nataka, and first coming into the Bessie Barnes Garden, and then coming into the United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury Community Garden, which is independent. However, we, through a big team effort, just got a deed to the property with the guarantee that it will remain a community garden for the next 35 years with opportunity to renew for another 15 years.
Hey.
And so there's Office of Housing. Sheila Dillon helped us really with the last minute thing that we needed help with. So, if anything that I've learned, it's that you can, have an idea 50 years ago, 50 years from now, and 50 years after that, because the life of the city is long, but it's up to us to engage young people like the Northeastern Student Garden Club there in the back.
Thank you, Lolita.
To keep the legacy going. It's very important.
Thank you so much, Lolita.
I never knew Mel King personally, but I followed his career. I am from Mississippi, and as you know, we're very active down there in the civil rights area. And when I heard about the gardens that he was proposing for Boston, I had bought an old house in Dorchester. And the first thing I did was start gardening. We moved in Christmas Day. And my kids thought it was a great Christmas present. They was very excited about it. And I started in April going over to Franklin Park, gathering up horse manure, stunk up the whole neighborhood. But I had a garden in spring. And all my neighbors was very happy to have tomatoes and greens or whatever I planted. So, and then I got involved with the Dorchester Garden Land. They were the first people that owned Nightingale. And it went from there to the trustees of the reservation. And then we, no, it was Boston Natural Areas Network. And then it went to the trustees. So I've been in gardening all my life. My grandfather was a farmer in the South. So I've been digging in the dirt since I was a kid. And my mother gardened in her back in our yard. So I will be in Nightingale for another 40 years.
Yes. Thank you, Elnora.
Me and my
Thank you,
wheelchair.
Elnora. Thank you, Elnora. Sarah?
So I'm came to all this a little later than some of you. And so what I learned from Mr. King was the importance of community.
Closer to the mic, Sarah.
Was the importance of community and neighborhood, and that we really see Berkeley Garden as a neighborhood, not just part of the community. It is itself a neighborhood. And learning to talk across the different boundaries with language and age, and everybody has their own idea about how to grow tomatoes, and learning how to talk together and share information and seeds, because I'm there now, but eventually I won't be there. And, you know, we want to be able to keep the consistency of the garden and the strength of that neighborhood.
Great, thank you.
So I was very pleased and happy to meet Mel in the mid 1970s. Okay. So I was an activist in college, came up from North Carolina to Cambridge to go to college. And then after that, became more involved in doing organizing especially in the Black community in Boston. And Mel was, from that moment, always a mentor and inspiration, a helper. I played a role in his campaign for mayor, but almost every activity that we were involved in, it became deeper work in Mattapan over time. But he was a clear part of that. And I'm learning more about his connection to gardens because I was involved with him because there's so many things that he was involved with in improving our community, and to know that it's even broader than I thought is another inspiration for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay, for our lightning round, before we have a little bit of time for questions, I would love to hear from each of you what you see as a key issue for community gardening now or in the future.
I'll do my best on that one. I guess from where I sit, given that change and that the gardens are always evolving, as is the city, the fact that the climate crisis is really looming, and that we really are going to need to invest in alternative ways to handle having enough fresh food and access and equity. So one of the big things is the access and equity for all, not just necessarily the abutters, given gentrification and the evolution of seawater rise, and we're going to have to use alternative methods than fossil fuels. And it's a challenge, but we can do this.
Thank you.
Okay, I forgot the question.
The question is, what is one key issue in community gardening now and in the future?
One key issue is to, I don't know, keep it organic, keep it hyper local, and keep it keep it volunteer, but volunteering in a way that doesn't deplete the volunteers. Because that is, that is something that, I've been 10 years and I don't know how you do 100. I can barely keep up with 15 people. It's a lot.
Thanks, Lolita.
I have a lot of help. My goal is to teach people to feed themselves rather than going to the grocery store. And you can preserve your food. I am a great proponent of preserving food. I grow my food, I preserve it, and I feed myself all winter. My goal is to teach the adult to feed themselves and their children, and the children to learn how, from an early start, from early age, how to feed themselves and how to grow food and how to take care of the soil.
I totally agree with you. I think that one of, I really agree with you because what we find is with the gentrification in the South End, a lot of people come into the garden and don't really know how to grow things. And they don't really have an appreciation for the ability to grow year round in the garden. And they find they find it a real mystery that you can put garlic in the fall and get it in the spring. So I think really the things that I really think are important now are just to keep people learning about how to grow food and just to make that information accessible and easy to implement.
Thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said. And I guess what I add is that this is the time to think more broadly about what it will mean going forward to grow that healthy food and make it accessible to all. So gardens, if you have a plot, think more broadly, even with that one plot, right? To bring in more people from the family, more other people to help you with it. And if you're thinking at all about a food forest, another way to think more broadly about some place where that food is accessible to all. So there's so many more ideas out there, but we can all keep going forward.
Thank you so much, Judy, thank you, everyone. So we do have time for some questions, right, Annabelle? Great. So does anyone have questions for the panelists?
What's your favorite vegetable?
Anyone have any questions?
Someone raise their hand.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Thomas Mulkey. I'm currently the vice president for the Gardening and Cooking Club in Roxbury Community College. And and currently we kind of have an issue in terms of funding. We don't know ways to get more money into our club, which is kind of limiting us to like equipment and just like kind of expanding our garden. So I was just wondering like any suggestions you guys have in terms of raising more funding and stuff like that.
Just right off the top, there's one due on March 19th, the grassroots grow. And then there's Northeastern also has a small grant that's available, with the deadline coming very soon. I know because I got to go home and do them.
Wow. I'm good at begging. You can also look for grants from different organizations like the Boston Foundation. That's a good place to start.
Well, you should look at the local businesses that are around. A lot of the banks all have little funds. Any franchise, even Dunkin' Donuts has a little fund. And
Anyone else who has a question? You can.
Just
No, yeah.
very quickly, it's a community college, and I know the governor is very interested in building free tuition for community colleges. You might start at the top and also work at the bottom, showing what you all can do as students to make a difference from both sides. Good luck.
I just wanted to say what Lolita was mentioning. I think you were talking about the Grow Boston Education Grant. Is that, no, you're talking about a different one. Okay. Well, we also have, Grassroots New England. Okay. Because we have a grassroots program. So Grassroots New England is what Lolita was talking about. We also have the Grow Boston, the city's Office of Urban Agriculture, has an education grant due on Monday. It's a very simple application. So if you come find me, I can give you my card and tell you how to find that. And then also just, your club should be in touch with our office, and we'll see how we can help you figure out, getting what you need. Yeah.
If anyone has, we probably have for one more question. I have two lined up. Does anyone else have a question? Raise your hand. Okay, so.
If I could have a quick explanation of what is a food forest as opposed to a garden?
We're definitely experts here in the room, including the Boston Food Forest Coalition. But just as a definition, a plot of land where you use nature's trees and other things, especially encouraging ones that grow fruits or nuts. But on that open space, you can plant other things as well that you'd like to see there. So in our case, we had the black walnut trees already there, right? And some berries already there, but we planted the blueberries, the raspberries, the fig tree, the pear tree, the cherry tree, and everything that grows there on that beautiful space of land is totally accessible to everyone. It's an open space. So unlike a community garden where there are individual plots that are designated to individual people or families, the food forest is open to the public. And everything that grows, whenever it's ripe, anyone can walk in, harvest it, and walk out. Or just go there and enjoy that lovely space.
So we have one more question. Want to ask it?
Hi, I'm work at the community garden in Lowell. We have 8 garden now, and it's have been 10 years since the first garden start. Currently we're struggling a lot with the engagement. So we're noticing gardener would come out and take care of their plot, but we have a one work day per garden a month, just in the during the weekend, just for people to come out and hang out and do some garden work together. But it's the past 2 years have been really struggling to have people to come out and engaging. We understand that because after COVID, a lot of people are still really not really comfortable to be with other people. But this is 2024, so we're just wondering if you have any tips that have to engage the gardeners for them to comfortable to come out and meet new people. And we also noticing a lot of people moving in Lowell as well. So it's just their first time to call Lowell is home. So yeah, thank you.
I would first say don't give up, because 10 years is not really a long time. At the United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury Community Garden, it literally took, I've been co-tending it with my children. It literally took 10 years to get some people to step their foot into the garden. So we just kept talking over the fence, passing vegetables over the fence. And then we said, come in and get the vegetables. And so, it was a long process. So know that.
Are you in the middle of a neighborhood or what's the setting? Because maybe you can engage some community organizations to work with youth and allocate a section, as well as have some kind of a way with like a potluck for people to meet each other and begin to get comfortable with each other and bring the food that they're familiar with and start to grow it. There's lots of ways to engage people, but it's not easy.
Yeah, and definitely, I think the connection to the community is the way to get more people. I also think the idea of having events is a good thing as well. Making sure that people know that there is support for each of the gardeners. That doesn't mean like big level support, but there are always gardeners in our garden. There are always gardeners who are way better than others, who are always willing to share advice and always willing to help others. And we have people in varying ages in our gardens. So some of those who, you know, have certain physical difficulties, even though we've raised some beds to make them higher so they don't have to lean over. We also have other gardeners who help those people with their plots, right? So if people have a sense that they're not alone in doing their gardening work, many times they feel much more secure.
Well, we have gardeners that help each other. And as soon as a new gardener comes in, you got at least 10 people helping them out. So in potlucks is a great way to get people to come in and engage. You say food, right? People will show up.
Thank you, everyone. I think that's the end of our panel. Yes. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. And I will hand it back to Annabelle.
Thank you all, and thank you for all the work you've done in the many decades collectively that you've put into the gardens, and lots to keep thinking about and dreaming about. I hope this is only the beginning. Thank you all, and we are going to transition to the workshop portion of the conference. So there's a food truck, BBIM box outside if you want to get lunch. Workshops start at 1, and just, I think I've said this a couple times, but there's an online program, there's a QR code